we have Elina Kotlyar here. Am I saying your last name right? Kotlyar?
Sure, yes.
So so Elina graduated from Emerson in 1996 with a communication disorders degree. Later, you got your master's in speech language pathology in 1998, also from Emerson, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then later, she got her MFA from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign in stage management in 2010. And so you're currently a speech language pathologist, and you direct the MayDay Festival, right?
I don't direct the MayDay Festival. I coordinate and organize it with a small group of.
So director in the sense that you're the organizer, yeah.
That's my title, yes, but yes.
Okay, gotcha. And you are also on the National Council Advisory Board as the chair, and you're currently in Minneapolis, right?
I am.
Yeah.
Yes. Where it's 38 degrees and sunny.
38?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. So take us through like your day-to-day and what you do.
Okay. Well, I work at both jobs weekly, so it's a very interesting schedule. But most of my hours are spent in our autism day treatment program. So I work with pretty young children, 18 months to 6 years of age, that have autism, different severity levels. And most kids in my program, all kids in my program come from refugee families from Somalia. So we work a lot with families that just recently come from Somalia or Kenya, actually, where most of the refugees camps are, or those families that the younger generation has grown up here. So we do a lot of education, not only about autism and language and communication and play development, but also about nutrition and medical needs and things like that. And multi-generational. We have families where a mom might be 60 years old, or 22. But one-on-one, I work with the kids, and I work on the team of people. So we have mental health professionals, we have an occupational therapist, and I mostly do. I can't really say that I do speech language therapy because most of my kids don't have skills enough to even learn how to speak. So we work a lot on reciprocal communication, and we work a lot on just connecting with another person and being in space with another person and learning how to use objects and moving on from that. So those are my mornings. And then some of my outpatient therapy, I have kids that just will work on S, and that's not at all exciting, but that sometimes a necessary part of the job is just work on sound production and just a variety, yes. So those are my mornings and kind of afternoons. And the theater job is, you would think, would be very different, but actually it's also steeped in communication and collaboration and working with a variety of different people. So I actually find both professions not to be that different from each other. Logistically speaking, I do much more organizing and coordinating in my theater job than in my speech pathology job. My speech pathology job is, a lot of it is on the feet, and I actually spend a lot of time in the gym and swinging with the kids and throwing them into big pillows, and playing with Play-Doh. And so I love toys. Not good at trivia at all, but I can play with any toy and I will beat you at it.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Potato head, give me potato head. I'm all there.
So you had a pretty consistent career with speech language pathology from the get-go. Yeah. So how did you decide that you were interested in stage management, and how did you bring that into your life?
I actually, so for a while, for 7 years, I worked on an army base as a speech language pathologist, and the army base was in Germany. And so we had a bunch of community theaters actually all over. Almost every military post or an Air Force base had a community theater. And I grew up on theater. I mean, I used to go watch opera and ballet and all of that since I was probably 3 or 4. So I've always had that interest. And I had a bunch of friends. One of them I'm still friends with. She's also a speech pathologist. And we went to local community theater, and she is also an actor. And I said, I'm just going to do props, and I started doing props, and then I learned how to stage manage because nobody ever wants to do that. People always want to be on stage, which I don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably one of the only things I would never do in my life was to get on stage and act. But yeah, so I learned, and we were really lucky because we had a professional director that was brought in from the States, and he would go from base to base and work with all the community theaters. And so I worked with him a lot, and because he was a professional director, he kind of knew what he needed from a stage manager. And so after a while, I decided that I needed more than just reading books and figuring out and making shit up. Oh, I shouldn't say that. I'm not. Sorry.
No.
Anyway, so that was also in 2007 was the year when my hospital was closing. So it was a time to figure out if I'm going to stay in Europe and move to another base, or if I'm going to come back to United States. And so I decided to go back to grad school because, that's fun. So I took 3 years off from speech pathology, which actually was really healthy and just kind of reinvigorating myself. I learned that I really miss the kids, and I learned that I really miss doing speech pathology. So that was really good. But while I was in grad school, I was 100%, probably 200% focused just on stage management and arts administration. And that was that. And then when I was done with that, I actually got a job in a performing arts center, and I did events management for several years, and did some early intervention with speech pathology because I couldn't really give that up. And financially, you really can't do the arts and not do anything else, which is really sad. Yeah. So when I moved to Minneapolis, my goal was to get a full-time job in the arts, and Minneapolis drew me because it is so rich in the art scene. I mean, we have some really, really amazing theaters, and most of them are really tiny, and none of them pay. And so after I looked for a job for a year and figured out that I couldn't support myself and have a mortgage and have an adult life, just working on the theater, I thought, well, I have another career. And so I combined them, and I'm actually really happy. It really works to balance. Yeah.
You said when you were filling out the form, one of your life advices was that it's never too late to reinvent yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like that is kind of where you realized that, and you kind of reinvented yourself a little bit.
I did. It's not the first time I realized that, but yes, absolutely. That's kind of my life.
It just made me think of that.
Yeah. Yes. That was one of the biggest reinventions, but absolutely. When I joined Zeta, I reinvented myself because I actually went to Emerson with one of the reasons, not the main one, but the reason I selected Emerson was because it had a very small Greek scene. And I would never in a million years think that I would ever pledge for Greek organizations. So, so reinventing yourself is really healthy.
Yeah.
You should do that.
I think that is something that is really nice to hear. I think just talking from personal experience and experiences I know a lot of others have, like in college, there's just a lot of pressure to kind of figure out your life right then and there, and know exactly what you're getting yourself into, and know what you're going to be doing 5 steps ahead from now. I think it's really refreshing and kind of takes the weight off to hear someone who has more life experience than you saying that, like, it's okay to let go of everything that you've kind of built up for yourself, to let go of expectations of yourself. And yeah, I think that's very freeing and good advice. So what is your favorite part about, well, toys is your favorite part, one.
Kids are my favorite part.
So what's another part of the industry that you work in that you enjoy?
I mean, kids, I love my kids, but actually, before I came to Minneapolis and started working at a day treatment program, I did early intervention. So I basically would go into the homes and work with families and teach them on how to play with their kids and what to do so the language development was on track, or and so I would say that throughout my career working with families probably has always been my favorite thing. Families are all very different, and you never know what to expect, and um, sometimes it's very uncomfortable and sometimes it's very comfortable, and a lot of times it's just in between. And so creating those relationships, I used to see 7 families a day, and I mean there were families that I saw for 2 years, 3 years, so you create really, really deep relationships, and you also realize that most people want to get a better life for their kids. And so that's why, whatever it is, it could be either immigrating to a different country, it might be getting services for the kids, or whatever. And so you're just there to kind of provide those resources and be there, not necessarily only to teach them, but also just to be a reinforcement and to show them how to be an advocate for their children. I think that throughout my career, probably the most important thing that I've done is to show families that they can be advocates for their own kids, because nobody else can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Only the family members can do that best.
Yeah.
So that's probably my favorite.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
it's really nice. And so have you noticed in your professional life anything that kind of relates back to your time in Zeta, and anything that has kind of been proven useful for your current position?
Mm-hmm. Well, Zeta for me has always been family. I mean, to be honest with you, the reason I pledged in my junior year all by myself was because because half of the chapter at that time were really good friends of mine, and just the relationships that I had with them, there was something more, there was something meaningful, because people would say to me, well, you already do all the like community service with them and whatever, and why aren't you in an organization? It was actually really funny.
Yeah.
So I guess, the community and the family of Zeta, but also just the relationships that you form. I mean, some of my best friends that I've been friends for millions of years are Zetas, and I know it will always stay that way. And we live, I mean, none of my friends live near me,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't matter as far as the
Yeah.
relationships go.
Yeah.
And there some I talk to every other week, and some I don't talk to for months, but that doesn't change as far as. So, and I would say, as far as my job, I mean, the creation of relationships and that communication and the ability of re-enter the relationship, even if it didn't, you know there was a break, which sometimes happens with our families. They discharge from services and then they come back, and be able to pick it up and kind of move along. So I think that there is some, I mean, very different, of course, but also the same. So
Yeah.
I would say from that perspective.
And I think there's something to be said about being in a scenario where you're being kind of pushed almost to your limit. You're in this really emotionally vulnerable space. You're doing all these other things. You're just in a very unique scenario where people are kind of seeing your true colors, regardless of whether you feel like you have control over it or not. And I think that there is something to be said for the bond that is created with other people in those moments. It's kind of like they've seen all of you and you've seen all of them, and there's almost nothing you have to lose with each other at that point. which can form very long-lasting relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. It's the creation of trust, which actually, again, moves along into my job, because there is no way I would be able to do my job if there was no trust between myself and my coworkers and myself and the families that I work with. And absolutely, I think that's what Zeta, at least for me, was all about. And the reason I pledged and the reason why I remained, for the last, I don't know how many million of years, is because of that trust in the relationship, is,
Yeah.
and the belief that there is something very good within the organization, and the organization will always change because evolution is necessary, but there is something that deep and meaningful that will always be there. And,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so before we wrap up, tell us a little bit more about your position with National Council and your relationship with Zeta now and how you can be a resource.
Well, right now I find myself mostly like the institutional memory of the organization, because I'm just very old and, sadly I can still pull things out of the hat. I was actually really happy to kind of step back, after years and years of being the first VP and this, and then I actually was advisory board chair before I became the national co-president. Usually that doesn't happen, and it shouldn't happen, but it happened with me. And then, I was doing co-presidency for a while, and it made me really, really happy that I was able to step back and act in a bit of a different role. And that's all. So yeah, I'm happy to kind of be here as institutional memory and as an advisory and bouncing board, as opposed to, really guiding the organization from day to day.
Yeah. So because you've been involved for so long, what would you say to current and active members about how they should be, or how what they can get out of National Council, and any advice that you have for Zeta is about to graduate and going forward into the future?
Mm-hmm. I think being a national council is very valuable. It's not for everybody. There's definitely the dedication, not only of time, but the bigger picture of what Zeta is.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's been valuable because I've been able to really watch the full organization grow pretty intimately, and there were points when I was in Zeta that we only had one chapter, which was Alpha, and it's just quite amazing to see how many chapters we have right now and how they're thriving. Now when I was an undergrad and then a little bit younger in my day, we had more professional chapters, and that's been a little bit sad to see that most of them have drifted away. But again, they might come back, and I think that there might not be the same necessity in what a professional chapter used to provide to people, right? And now we have different outlets. We have the social media, and we have all the stuff that, so for me personally, just watching the organization grow and evolve has been really rewarding. And then, of course, being on a national council, I'm here as support and, whatever, in a way, but I wouldn't necessarily suggest that every single graduate becomes a member of national council, because it doesn't work for
Do you have
everybody.
any sort of general life/professional advice for Zeta's about to graduate and go off into the world?
Yeah. The biggest life suggestion I will give you is that you always need to enjoy what you do, and you should never take a job that you hate going to. Absolutely never. You should love waking up in the morning at least 4 out of 5 days a week and going to work. Or if you work 6, 7 days a week, that's also, which I've done. And as soon as that job becomes burdensome, you should look for another job. Yeah. That's my biggest, because you need to be happy. That's pretty much like it doesn't matter how much money you're paid, but you need to be happy in what you do, or you're going to get a heart attack.
Well, that is
I'm a realist. I'm not at all an optimist.
No, I think that's a great piece of advice to end on. Thank you so much, Elina. It was great talking to you.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.